Hello, welcome back to my next episode of the series Lifestyle Etiquette Unravelled, an educational fireside chat with global experts, creators, opinion leaders, personalities, and executives from all corners of the world, sharing and educating everything lifestyle and etiquette related. These experts are using their industry platform to shape and create a resilient and healthy future for the next generation. I'm Juliana.
Today, I'm joined by a man who needs no introduction, but I'll give him one anyway. He was a former White House Communications Director, an author. He's founder of Skybridge Capital and chairman of Skybridge Alternative Conference SORT. Welcome to the one and only Anthony Scaramucci. Hello.
That's a very nice introduction. It's almost like my mother wrote that introduction for you, Juliana. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for being here. I'm so excited and I'm really honored to have you here with me. Thank you.
The pleasure is mine. Thank you.
Thank you. Anthony, you have a lot of businesses. You are a financier, you are author, businessman, producer. And this year, many are forced to go into the entrepreneurial path just to survive. And you as a global entrepreneur, can you share with us, especially here in the Asia Pacific region, but also MENA region, your journey to entrepreneurship? Especially what it takes and any keys, to run a successful business.
Well, I think the first thing I would say upon reflection now that I turned 57 in January. And so I left. Yeah, thank you. I left school 32 years ago, Harvard Law School. And I spent the first 7 years at Goldman Sachs before I left to start creating companies. And so I guess what I would say to you is my observation is some of it is providential. Some of it is, if you believe in the luck of the universe or kismet, and some of it is planning. General Eisenhower once said, the plans never work out, but the planning is super important. The planning will help you get to where you want to go. And he often remarked that all battle plans, they go by the wayside once you make contact with the enemy. And so, what did Mike Tyson say, the very famous fighter? Everybody has a plan until they're punched in the face, and then the plan breaks down. And so if you're an entrepreneur, you're thinking about entrepreneurship, you have to put yourself in a position to allow the universe to help you. Okay, so how do you do that? Number one, you have to work super hard. Number two, you have to dial down the primordial fear in your personality. And I will tell you, when I was 32 years old and I left Goldman Sachs, I had no money. My parents were blue-collar workers here in New York. My dad was a crane operator. He was paid by the hour. So when I left Goldman, I had paid off my student debt, but I really had no net worth at that time. And I had tremendous fear when I left Goldman. And I remember getting myself, Juliana, sick over that weekend, from the anxiety of starting my own business. And so the number one thing I would tell people is they have to battle fear. Elon Musk said the other day that if you want to be in a startup, you have to eat broken glass while you're jumping off of a cliff. And that is literally a very hard thing for a lot of people to do. But what I will say to everybody on this Zoomcast, everybody on your podcast, that if you can do that, it is one of the most exhilarating, most wonderful feelings in the world as a business person, because your vitality, who you are as a person, your purpose, your mission, the way you feel about life, the way you feel about your dreams and trying to fulfill your dreams are all encapsulated and all incorporated in that. And then the beautiful thing about everything that I just said, even if you don't make it the first time and your venture fails, you have this journey, you have these battle scars that you can take with you. And so you're talking to me on an interesting day because 30 years ago, I was fired from Goldman Sachs. And I want to tell this quick story. And
Today, 30 years ago.
Yeah, today, 30 years ago, I was fired from Goldman Sachs. It was a Friday night, and the partner in charge of the area that I was hired into. So I got hired in August. I was fired in February. So I was there for 18 months, and we were going through a recession as a result of the Gulf War. And so there I was, fresh out of Harvard Law School, 18 months into my job, and I was fired. So I was very famously fired from the White House, but that wasn't my first firing. My first firing was at Goldman.
Yes.
And so there I was at age 27 being told that I had to walk out the door, and they were handing me a severance check. Now, the good fortune for me is I was able to find another job at Goldman. So if you looked at my resume, it looks like I was there for 7 years, but there was a 2-month period of time, Juliana, where I was fired looking for a job. And why am I bringing this up? Because it was a very painful moment for me, but it got me ready for entrepreneurship. It got me ready to absorb failure. It got me ready to address whatever my shortcomings may be, and it got me ready for the adaptation needed for entrepreneurship. So I went on subsequently to spend another 5.5 years at Goldman.
Yeah.
So I was there 7 years in total. And when I left, we started a very successful business, which was ultimately sold. And then the business that I sold was sold to a company called Neuberger Berman. And then Neuberger was sold to Lehman Brothers, which has now been bankrupt now for 13 years. But Lehman was the largest bankruptcy in U.S. history, for that matter. But I left there before it went bankrupt in 2005, and I started Skybridge. So, but here's the thing I would say. You've got to be willing to take risks. I mean, think about, I failed in the White House. I got fired after 11 days. But think of my life experience. I was on Air Force One. I did a press briefing in the press room at the White House.
We'll come to that.
Whatever my relationship is with the president today,
yes.
I was certainly there as a proud American trying to help him. And my point to everyone listening, have no fear. And by the way, I had a humiliating experience being fired from the White House in terms of the way the press treated me and the...
we'll come to that, yes.
The
That's
fall.
very interesting, yeah.
Yeah, but I'm just letting you know, it's all tied into being an entrepreneur. It's all tied in because it's about risk-taking. It's about handling failure.
Yes.
It's about being able to use your sense of humor in a situation where you're not doing well.
Yes.
And it's about resilience. It's about climbing out of that hole. You know, you mentioned Asia and the culture in Asia. One of the most amazing things about Singapore is a hub for entrepreneurs. Singapore is a hub for business development. I've done my conference in Singapore at the Marina Bay Sands Hotel twice now. I hope to return with. Yeah, we did it in 2012 and we did it in 2013. When they stopped the flights, the direct flights from New York and LA, it became very difficult for us to do the event in Singapore. So we have postponed it effectively. But
good to know that. Yeah, for
those prior to the pandemic, those flights had returned. So I love Singapore. I love the city of Singapore. I love the entrepreneurial spirit in Singapore. I love the vitality of that city. And there's a lot of things going on in that city as it relates to the intersection of culture and style and all of this this stuff that Singapore has. And if you look at Singapore geopolitically and strategically, it's in a very, very interesting place on the map for entrepreneurs. But I'm going to say something generally about Asian culture, and this is not to be stereotypical, but it's, you know, certain Asian cultures have a fear of losing face.
Yes.
And they have a fear of getting caught up where they've started something and it hasn't worked well, and now they have to display that failure, if you will, to their social group or to their family. And what I would say is try to break out of that to the extent that you can do that.
Exactly.
To the extent that you could make that leap. It is very, very difficult, trust me. Even in America, where I say it's probably more of a culture of entrepreneurship here in America. But it is very difficult, to say the least.
That's a great message, especially for here, turning failure into success. That's great. But that's leading me to my next question, and I think it was your first book title, Finding Your Fortune Without Losing Your Soul. Says
Yeah.
a lot about a man coming from the world of finance, Wall Street, and politics.
Yes.
I would really like to know what this title means for you when you did it, and why did you choose to get into this industry? Although you studied law, I know you had economics as well, but still, after studying law, why did you go into this industry? And then this book title, it made me really think, that from a man coming from this rough, really hard industry.
Well, I wrote in that book, and that book was written over 10 years ago now. But what I wrote in that book, because I wanted to write down my rite of passage. I grew up in a blue collar family. I went to my first job interview at Goldman. I mean, I'm wearing Brioni today, but my first job interview at Goldman Sachs, I was in 100% polyester. So I just want you to imagine that I walked into the interview. I had a polyester suit on, a polyester shirt, and a polyester tie. So, the partner from Goldman pulled me aside. He said, "You're a smart kid, but you're the worst dressed person that we've met at the Harvard Law School." I remember being embarrassed by that.
But you stood out.
And he told me I had to go buy a suit. Otherwise, he wouldn't invite me to the callback interview down at Goldman Sachs' headquarters. And the reason I bring that up is that it was a rite of passage for me, going from a parochial environment, a sheltered environment, in a blue collar family where my dad never, had saw the inside of a country club, and we had never had any experience in the corporate world, to making that transition to where I am today. And I thought it was important to write about it because, in America, the American dream still lives. And I think it's important for younger people, no matter where they're growing up or wherever their start is, that they have this opportunity to advance and to think of themselves a certain way. But I chose Wall Street because I had no money. I'd like to tell you that it was more spiritual than that or ethereal than that, but it wasn't, Juliana. I was looking down the barrel of $150,000 of student loans at that time. So that's about $400,000 or $500,000 in today's dollars. And I had to pay it off. And so I went to Wall Street. I told my older children, I went to Wall Street because I knew that even if I was medium successful, I would make enough money on Wall Street to be able to afford a good lifestyle for my family and to help the people around me. I also knew at a very young age that I would be in a negative subsidy to my parents. My parents, unfortunately, would not be making enough money, and my dad's pension, given the cost of living here in New York, they would never really be able to live comfortably without my help. And so I was always driven towards the money side of things. Having said that, I wanted to be an entrepreneur. I wanted to have my own business. I wrote down on the day that I left Harvard Law School, the week before my graduation, I wrote down a list of goals. One of my goals was to start my own business once I had no student loan debt. And so that happened about 6.5 years after I joined Goldman. And then at the end of that year, I left and started my first company. So
always driven.
But that book was about trying to be a good person. That book is about karma, and that book is about you don't have to be in there for the last dollar. There's one chapter in the book, How to Find Your Fortune Without Losing Your Soul, which is about Li Ka-shing, who's still alive, God bless him. Li Ka-shing, the property tycoon and the conglomerate entrepreneur in Hong Kong. He's got to be closing in on 90 today. One of the richest people in Asia. I talk about a meeting I had with him when I was 35 years old. And I'm sitting in the room with him, and I say, he's asking me about the US stock market. And I say, Mr. Lee, the market could go up or down. I don't really have a great opinion. I said, but I'm probably never going to meet you again, or maybe I will. I don't know. But I've only got a few minutes with you. Tell me something about yourself that I could take with me for the next half of my life. You're 70, I'm 35.
Yes.
Tell me something about yourself. And he
Very
said something to me that I never forgot. And it's quite Asian, by the way. And it's a very smart way to think about business. He said to me, Anthony, leave money on the table for your partners. Because if you leave money on the table for your partners, they know that you're not looking for the last dollar in the deal. And you'll always have people that will want to do business with you because they'll think of you as a fair person.
Yeah.
But the most important thing about that is it'll make you happy, because if you are looking for the last dollar or the last nickel in a negotiation,
yeah,
and maybe you even get it, you're always frustrated. You always want more.
That's true.
And you don't need to be that greedy.
Yes.
And so that's one of the reasons why I wrote that book. I thought it was important to write all that stuff down.
Okay, you don't need to be that greedy. Also a very important message here. To my next question, inside every head is a world. Can you help us tap into your world and unravel misconceptions of your industry and also the quirks and curiosities of your work?
Well, misconceptions about the industry. Well, listen, I'm in the hedge fund business. And so there's some very, very successful people in our business. And sometimes when you have a lot of wealth, it requires you to have also a lot of responsibility. And so unfortunately, just like everything in life, there's a percentage of people in our businesses that are irresponsible, or they do things that are rule breaking or amoral, or they do things that are, outside of where you should be in terms of good social graces. And so they have a tendency to spoil the industry.
Yes.
And unfortunately that would be true for a lot of industries. We have good and bad doctors, we have good and bad teachers,
Exactly.
we have good and bad everybody. But when you have lots of money, it gives the attention to the media.
Yes.
And so I think one of the misconceptions about our industry, and I truly believe this, is that there's a lot of good people in our industry, but because of the media spotlight, I think sometimes the industry is put into a foul category. Moreover, it's easy to scapegoat the industry if you're in the world of politics. And so, the Wall Street people, the hedge fund community, were blamed by and large for the financial crisis. But if you really study the financial crisis in 2008, it was a combination of many different factors that caused that crisis. But, again, here's what I would say to people, and I've learned this the hard way. What other people think about you is none of your business.
Yeah.
My grandmother used to tell us that as kids. I've had to live that, because I don't look at the remarks or comments that are made about me on social media, positively or negatively. I don't look at the sentiment that people may have. I find that I'm just doing the best I can, living my life the best way that I can.
Yes.
And, have I done everything perfectly? No. Do I have regrets? Certainly. Do I wish I had treated certain people better over the course of my life? Absolutely. I'm not a perfect person, but I do get up in the morning with a drive and a determination to try to do the right thing for a very large group of people. And if it works out, it leads to a lot of positive outcomes. It leads to wealth. It leads to great social connections. It leads to great friendships, and it leads to closer family relationships. So,
right.
But here's the thing. We're always searching for perfection. This internet, the Instagram, the Twitter, the Facebook,
yes,
has put a lot of pressure on people. And so I tell my kids, relax. That person's taking the perfect picture of themselves with the light a certain way, and and I get that, but everybody has strengths and weaknesses and ups and downs in their life. But the internet is definitely putting a lot of pressure on people. It's either through the cyberbullying, or through the sanitation of people's lives, the way they look on the internet, it puts pressure on each other where it creates feelings of inadequacy that are not correct. And it's not necessary. You don't need to feel that way. You know, we're all just human beings, you know, and whether you read Eastern literature and Eastern philosophy, or you look through the Western canon of Western culture, what do we know? We're all human beings, and we all have certain parts of our lives that are axiomatic to the human condition. That is our birth, our rite of passage, and our eventual death. Beautiful. And nobody can escape that.
Correct.
And so a result of which we should calm down towards each other and recognize the common struggle that we all have here and see if we can make each other better.
Correct. Wonderful. I would like to ask you some questions on a topic very close to my heart. We are coming now to communication skills, interpersonal skills. We humans are hardwired for communication. And you, as an eloquent communicator and international speaker, we'll see how far you go, but it would be nice if you could share with us whether you were in a situation in your life where you have the feeling you missed an opportunity because of lack of self-management to communicate effectively, or where you thought you didn't use actually what you master very well, I think, bringing your message effectively and persuasively across. Were you in such a situation where you think, because I missed this through?
Well, I mean, Juliana, there's probably hundreds of those situations for me. You know, I would say, obviously, I made a mistake in the White House where I trusted a reporter. I was saying something to him off the cuff in a very locker room like way. He was a fellow Italian.
Good you mentioned that, because we are talking about communication. So you spoke like in a locker room way?
Yeah, well, you know, I was talking with some level of vulgarity, and I was talking with some level of, you know, I was making a joke. You could find it on the internet. It was obviously a mistake that I made. I trusted the person. I thought we were having a one-on-one conversation. He recorded it. He ran to CNN with it, and then I got fired from the White House. Now, you know, the good news for me is that firing probably helped my career as opposed to hurt it. At the time, it felt very painful. And the great irony is that General Kelly, who was the White House chief of staff that fired me, him and I have become very close personal friends. So there's an interesting side to the story. But I think in general...
That's an interesting development.
I'm sorry?
That's an interesting development.
Yeah, no, we became friends. We do a lot of public speaking together. We were most recently in Iowa together speaking. You know, here's what I would say.
In that situation, where you may be under, do you think today, looking back, were you frustrated, under stress? Would you have spoken or communicated differently if you would have known it's not off the record?
Well, I definitely thought it was off the record. You know, he claimed that I didn't say it was quote unquote off the record, and that's a mistake that I made. But I had known the reporter for 20 plus years. My parents knew his parents for 50 years. They were fellow Italian Americans here on Long Island. We were in the same community together. So I didn't think he was going to do that to me. And that's my mistake. I have to own that for the rest of my life. But here's what I would say. When you make a mistake like that, own it. You know, I never blamed anybody for my firing from the White House. I made a mistake. The mistake was fireable. I'm accountable for that mistake. There was never any problem with me feeling that somebody did me wrong. I did myself wrong by making that mistake.
That's interesting. That's interesting. You just mentioned you make yourself accountable on that in terms of communication. And I think Aristotle, one of my famous philosophers, said that once. So the communicator, the speaker, is accountable for what he's saying, and he's bringing the message to the audience. So you have the responsibility, actually, the way you bring the message to the audience, and you have to hold it also accountable. And you just mentioned that. That's actually very interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, here's what I would say to you, and I firmly believe this, that because you're talking about communication.
Yes.
I think the number one thing that we all need to think about is authenticity.
Yes.
At the end of the day, the camera knows, Juliana. The people know when you look into the camera,
Yes.
and you're expressing yourself, people know right away if you're spinning them, if you're homogenizing your language, if you're
Yes.
trying to say something to them where you're not really speaking truthfully.
Yes.
The camera knows when you're saying something with sincerity. It knows when you're saying something that's heartfelt.
Yes.
And I think that one of the things that people do in communication that is successful is expressing vulnerability, because the minute that you express some level of vulnerability or fallibility, the receiver of those communiques is like, okay, this person is acknowledging their human weaknesses as well as whatever their strengths are. And so what happens is your message is more resonating, I believe. I think
Correct.
that
I believe that too, because you also create emotional connection.
correct.
Which you just said, it makes you human.
Makes you human.
Yes.
And also I think people will then also, they empathize with you and they say, okay,
Yes.
like, this guy is not coming at me. I mean,
Correct.
yourself, myself, others. I could give you my resume and I could read my resume to you. It sounds pretty good. And I could start handling myself in a certain way where you think that I am arrogant, supercilious, and full of myself, okay? Or I can express my resume to you with the reality of my resume, that I've been fired more than once, that I've had setbacks in my career, I've had setbacks in my financial career, I've had setbacks. You mentioned the fact that I produced some movies. Some of them did very well, some of them did not do well. I've had setbacks in my family relationships. And all of a sudden you see this whole mosaic, you see this whole picture, and you recognize that, okay, I'm just another person out there trying super hard, got a lot of industry and energy and enthusiasm for life, but I may not be getting everything right.
Yeah.
And I think that's a big lesson in communication.
That's good. You just mentioned that. That leads actually to my next question, and still in communication, I would like to know a bit more. Which role do you think does self and social awareness play to communicate effectively?
Well, I think it's everything. At the end of the day, the people that are more psychologically minded and are more self-aware are able to connect with a broader group of people. And, when you talk about be able to connect across cultures, I'll tell you a quick funny story. Okay. And I think you'll get this. So I'm in Singapore. It is the first SALT conference. It's 8 a.m. in the morning. We have the Deputy Prime Minister. He's going to come in and speak at 10. We've got a beautiful event coming. We've got Tony Blair coming, the former Prime Minister of
UK.
UK. We have Timothy Geithner, who was the former Secretary of Treasury of the United States. We've got a whole host of different luminaries coming. And my staff, two of them, which had lived in Singapore for about 3 months planning the event. I've arrived in Singapore a week early to get myself rested and, on the time schedule.
The time zone,
and they sat me down and they said to me, well, this is Singapore and there's a certain protocol and there's a certain respect you have to show, and you can't say it this way and you can't say it that way, and you have to say it this way. And they're giving me this whole list of things to do. And so I got the list and I got up to the microphone, and I literally, Juliana, I sounded like a robot. And I got off the stage and I turned to my team. I said, I'm not doing this. this is not me.
Exactly. You weren't yourself.
And I said, trust me, the Singaporeans, they know I'm an American. They also know I'm an Italian American from Long Island. They don't expect me to act like Lee Kuan Yew when I show up here on the stage. I'm going to be myself.
Yes.
And if people
That's
like it, that's
so
great.
interesting.
And if they don't like it, then we're leaving. Do you understand what I'm saying? And so the next time I got on the stage, I literally said that. Got up there, I said, look, I got this whole list of things from my team. They told me I had to act a certain way. I'm here in Singapore. I got news for you. I can't do it. Okay? Everyone started laughing.
Because you won't be authentic. Yes.
Yes, correct. Having said that, if I grew up in Singapore and I was part of the citizenry of Singapore and I had those cultural norms, then me acting like an Italian from Long Island would have been out of character. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yes.
And so my point is just relax and be yourself.
Be yourself.
I think people want authenticity.
Correct.
More than they want what you think that they want. Does that make any sense?
Yes. Oh, that's really nice. I'm so happy you explained that with a story, which makes it imaginative. Very good. I would like to go further. How you just mentioned this example with Singapore, and you talk to different audiences. How does your communication differ to all the roles you play, whether as a speaker or to, for example, I heard you that at Future Investment Initiation, as an investor, or as you had, I think last week, if I'm not wrong, with a TikTok personality. How do you really get into, or in a role you play, how do you communicate to all these people? Do you, just now as you mentioned, do you change your communication style? How can you tell us a bit more?
I think it's interesting. So I'm always trying to find a moment of connectivity.
Yeah.
So if I'm in Singapore, I want to let people know that I appreciate the origination of the city and I appreciate what Lee Kuan Yew did to build the city. And I appreciate the culture of Singapore. If I'm in Beijing, I would also want to relate to people that, yes, I'm not just here as an ignoramus. I've actually done some homework in the situation. And so I think, there's an axiom that is cross-cultural, and that is when you show an interest in someone and you show an interest in their origin and you show an interest in who they are, what happens is you can build a nice relationship. Before I spoke to you today, my family is from a small town in the Perugia region of Italy.
Yes.
It's called Gualdo de Torino. And before I spoke to you today, the mayor of Gualdo de Torino contacted my office and he wanted to speak to me by Zoom and he had a translator. And so I got on the phone with him and he proceeded to tell me that, my grandfather, Alessandro Scaramucci, and my grandmother, Celestina, were born in that town and they wanted to make me an honorary citizen.
Oh.
And we got into a conversation about the town and we got into a conversation about my heritage as an Italian, now an Italian American.
Yes.
And, I think there's a connection. And I'm able to talk to him about my heritage as an Italian, and he's obviously the mayor of that town.
Yes.
All of a sudden, we're making that connection. You're talking about Singapore. Lee Kuan Yew once said something about America that I'll share with you. He was being interviewed by Graham Allison, the dean of the Kennedy School of Government, and he said that America has an interesting dynamic because it is a resilient country, but it's also a cross-cultural country where you could leave India and you could become an Indian American. You could leave Italy and become an Italian American. You can become a Chinese American. And you can do that and you can create that assimilation for your family over a period of time and everybody's American. However, other countries, it's harder to do. I can't leave America and go to China and be a Chinese citizen and an American Chinese or an Italian Chinese. I could be an expat there, but I really can't be fully assimilated into that cross-cultural melting pot.
Yes, correct.
And so what Mr. Lee said, which I think is very visionary, is that America therefore can draw on the other 7+ billion people as a resource. Of course, it has to think about its immigration policies appropriately to do that. But my point being that, it's a great understanding of America. And so I'm absolutely certain that Mr. Lee, when he was meeting with American leaders, they were impressed with his understanding of our country.
Yes.
I just think that you have to think like that. You have to put yourself in the shoes of the other person, or whoever it is you're talking with, and you have to let them know that you care about them and that you're intellectually curious about their lives and their country and the things that they're doing.
Wonderful. I hope the message came well across. We've actually been already to the next topic I would like to talk about, namely global cultural awareness. But still, I would like you to maybe summarize to the audience, what is your message to those, for example, who really lack communication skills and are in situations where they have to overcome challenges and they have to address that verbally? What is your message to them, how to overcome that and then bring their message effectively across, especially those who really lack these skills?
So I think the first question I would ask somebody is, what is preventing them from being able to communicate? And so typically, not to overgeneralize, but typically it is about self-consciousness.
Yes.
So what ends up happening is when you're speaking in public or you're speaking to a group or speaking to a new group, you're worried that you're going to be judged by the people that you're speaking to. And so what happens is, the reason why public speaking, people say that it's up there sometimes with death in terms of fear, is that the judgment. I'm going to go up there, I'm going to sneeze, there's going to be a booger that flies out of my nose, I'm going to say something wrong that's going to be embarrassing, this is being recorded, and so therefore it's there for posterity, and oh my God. Or when you're looking down the barrel of a television camera, you're like, oh my God, there's 5 million people listening to me, and oh my God, I'm going to say something stupid in this situation.
Correct.
And so again, it goes back to the early part of this conversation about forcing yourself out of your comfort zone. And it's about forcing yourself to be willing to embrace and make mistakes.
Yes.
Now, I have made gaffes, and obviously I've done things regrettable. And I've said things to people privately that I thought were private that ended up being recorded. And so I've had a slate of ups and downs in my career. And I think if you get to the point where you actually don't care, you're in a much better place. And so I don't know how to convince somebody of that. But I can tell you something that I told my daughter, who's now 25, but when she was 12 years old, I put her at a baseball stadium in New York to sing God Bless America. And she was a solo singer in front of 53,000 people. And she's got a beautiful singing voice. She's now in the entertainment industry today at age 25. Yes. But there she was at age 12. And she was like, Dad, I am so scared. There's 53,000 people that I'm going to be singing live in front of. And what I said to her, I'll share with you. What I said, Juliana, is, well, okay, I want you to imagine having a conversation with one person or singing for one person. Are you comfortable doing that?
That's great. Yes.
She said, yes. And I said, well, and then if each one of those 53,000 people were in a room one at a time with you, would you be comfortable with them? Yes, I would. Okay, well then think about it that way. Why is it that you could be comfortable with each of those people, but yet when you see 53,000 of them, you're not comfortable? It has to do with the way you're thinking about the thing in your mindset.
Yes.
Change your mindset.
Yes.
Recognize that you're now singing for one person 53,000 times, or you're talking to one person 53,000 times. And if you can start to think like that, you can remove stage fright, you can remove anxiety from communication. Because most people, no matter how shy they are or how self-conscious they are, they can have a conversation with a friend of theirs. To your point, we are social people. And so therefore, start thinking about it that way and start recognizing how much in common we all have with each other. And then all of a sudden, your inhibitions about it will start to fall away and you'll feel comfortable talking.
Beautiful. I love that. You are such a great analyst, incredible, and not only business and political analyst. I personally feel you are such a great analyst in human behavior. And that's why I actually love talking to you about all these interpersonal skills, to let others see this other side of yours and the experience you have and all the setbacks you've gone through, and that you're not only, you know, the financier or the hedge fund or that political figure. It's incredible. I love that. Really, you have such
Well, it's very sweet. It's very nice of you, Juliana.
great
Thank you.
human behavior, the way you analyze that, and with the examples you bring forward for people to really understand when they have a story. You know, it's easier to remember, and hopefully something they can practice, what is holding you back, and have the self-consciousness. Or imagine you are singing to one person and these are 50,000. Just imagine it's one person. Wonderful. Thank you for that. We'll come now to what we've been already talking before, to promote global cultural awareness. And I would like to use this platform to promote that through etiquette. So my next question to you is, first of all, are there any must-know etiquette rules in your industry, especially because you are really coming from a rough industry? Are there any must-know etiquette rules? Does anyone even follow them?
Well, I can tell you something, Juliana. If there are must-known etiquette rules, I don't know them. You know what I mean? So I'm like rampaging, operating as a lone wolf operator, I guess. I don't know any off the top of my head that I could
Yes.
point to.
Yes.
What I would say to you about our industry, which I'm not necessarily saying it's unique to our industry, but I do think it's a very important part of the culture of our industry.
Yeah, the
is
culture.
a verbal handshake. So imagine if I pick up this hardwired phone and I call somebody and I say, I want to buy 50,000 shares of Citibank or 50,000 shares of Amazon. And the person says, okay, and I have an account there, and the person says, okay, you just bought 50,000 shares of Amazon, and let's say that's moving several tens of millions of dollars. That is done. That is a signed, sealed, delivered contract. You see, You see what I mean?
Yes.
And so if I say to him, I want to sell the Amazon,
Yes.
and Amazon is at 10 and it goes to 15
Yes.
the second after I sold it, well, you know what? He's got that value. Now
Yes.
I don't have the value. Moreover, if I say I want to buy Amazon and it's at 10 and it drops to 5, 10 seconds later, well, I can't pick up the phone and say, hey, I was just kidding. I didn't want to buy Amazon.
Oh,
You see what I mean? And
yes.
so one of the more cultural things
Yes.
about our
That's quite interesting.
business is your word
Is
sacrosanct. And if I ever broke my word in a transaction like that or tried to get out of that, number one, I would probably lose an arbitration in my industry. Okay. And then number two, I would be ruined. You have to keep your word. And it's a verbal thing as opposed to a written thing. And I think that's one of the more unique things about Wall Street.
Wonderful. And now to the country. any do's and don'ts in US, but I want to take specifically New York, one should know before traveling there? Are there any do's and don'ts specifically to New York?
Well, I mean, listen, this is a silly thing to say, but you come to New York, don't take a ride with anybody that's not authorized and licensed, because God forbid, you don't know what the hell's going to happen. The second thing I would say about New York is it's not as rough and tumble as people actually think. There's a cultural humanity to New York, and I could take you back to 9/11 when the buildings came down. The people really got together, and I think people are always first-time travelers to New York are always amused by, or they are relieved by, is that there's we may talk with a harsh language, we may have tough accents, but I think we're generally pretty nice people.
Yes. Oh, I heard that. Yeah, actually.
New Yorkers try to go out of their way for each other. Remember, the most powerful words in English, which are probably universal to every language. Can you help me with something? I need your help.
Yeah.
Ben Franklin, one of the founders of the country, said that if you want a friend, ask the person for a favor.
Yes.
And it's sort of counterintuitive, but if you ask the person for a favor, what happens is the person generally has a willingness to try to help you. They want to create that goodwill. They want to create that good karma.
Yes.
And then all of a sudden, the person that you asked the favor for did something nice for you, and now they feel good about themselves. And then all of a sudden, you can start to bond with them. And so, what I would say to people, not just specific to New York, but in general, it's okay to ask for help, and you'll be blown away at how much help you can get. You have to think about this. When I entered this industry, I had absolutely no relationships. I'm sitting here 33 years later, and, I've been around the world. I have a global business. I've been a delegate at the World Economic Forum for 15 years.
Yes.
I've started the SALT conference, which I've done twice in Singapore, once in Tokyo, once in Abu Dhabi, 10 times here in North America. And, I have an interesting set of relationships today, primarily because I was willing to ask people for favors. And flip side of that, I was also willing to reciprocate and return favors to people.
Yes, you are.
And I would also say to you that I spent a lot of time with young people because I believe I have to pay that forward, because there were older people when I was a younger man helping me. And so therefore, when a person calls or they need mentoring advice, or, we have a very robust summer program at Skybridge, because I'm trying to help young people get their careers started and to get themselves moving in the right.
That is so great. And Anthony, I don't know whether you believe it or not, or people told you, the young people love you. The younger generation love you. And it's wonderful if you could be that mentor for them. And that's why I really wanted to win you for the younger generation. Asia is young, and also the MENA region is really young.
Listen, I mean, the opportunities are in MENA, and they're in Asia.
Yes.
In Southeast Asia. Yes. And these are beautiful cultures. And I tell people the hospitality that I've experienced in places like Beijing, Singapore, Bali, the places I've been in the world.
Yeah.
The Middle East,
Yes, Abu Dhabi, yes.
Americans have sometimes this parochial view of the rest of the world, unfortunately. And so we don't have many Americans that spend a lot of time on the road and travel to these sorts of areas. But, and I can tell you that I came from a family that was fairly sheltered. Now, my parents didn't have the money to do that kind of traveling. Yeah. And so most of our vacations were by car.
Yes.
To some close destination,
exactly.
With a lot of traveling. And so, I've been all over the world.
Yes.
I'm also, I've been on troop support missions to Afghanistan, and I've been on troop support missions to Iraq. And I have experienced those cultures as well. And I will tell you that obviously there's strife and struggle in the world, and there's poverty in the world that we need to figure out a way to eradicate, and even poverty here in the United States. But I think that when you think about needs and human needs, if we can start to fix those things, even if you have a small amount of money, but you feel good about yourself and aspirational, you can have a very successful life. You know, my parents didn't have a lot of money, but my parents always felt that they were working hard so that one or two of their children could use the platform that they created to rise to another level. You know, that sort of aspirational idea, we need to continue to further that. We need to do that globally, you know, and whether we recognize it or not, we're stuck together. You know, we're all doing it together, you know, and so we can pretend otherwise. You know, when Mr. Trump was saying America first, I was, you know, it's a rough thing because, you know, we should be united. Perhaps it's first we are Americans, but we are tied into the global community, and we have a responsibility to be tied into the global community, and we have a responsibility to each other from that perspective without overdoing nationalism. There's always been historical danger to that sort of sentiment. So, but, you know, listen, I mean, you know, I'm very optimistic about the future. I'm optimistic about these vaccinations because this new therapy, the new RNA sequencing vaccinations could help us as we face more pandemics, because these are blueprint vaccinations more than they are inoculations of a small amount of the disease. They're more of a diagram for your body to understand how to protect itself. And hopefully as these variants happen, we can solve for these variants by using these new vaccines that we've developed. And so there's a lot of things to be optimistic about, and there's a lot of things to be hopeful for. But we got to get the political leadership right. We got to get the cultural aspects of this thing right.
Correct.
And it's going to be far from perfect. It's always a work in progress. You know, it's as Abraham Lincoln said, we are a union, but we're an imperfect union.
Yes.
And we're striving for greater perfection. Well, we have to think about that in terms of our global relationships as well.
Good transition to my next question. We are stuck together. It has been a difficult year, really difficult year for many of us. And I've also seen that the fundamental human needs are coming more and more to the surface, whether it's the belonging, purpose, and more. And I would really like to know from you, if you could share with us your reflection on how 2020 was for you. And for many, still going on to be a difficult year. Could you share with us personally and then professionally when reflecting?
Well, listen, I mean, it's a tough year for everybody. There's no question about that. I would say to you that my travel schedule is a fairly robust travel schedule. So in the month of January, I was in London, Florida, Arizona, Italy. And then in February, I was in Abu Dhabi. I was in Dubai, Riyadh, and I was moving around the world very aggressively. And then I was out in LA to do the Bill Maher show. Then I went to Hawaii with my wife. And then very abruptly on the 13th of March, which was a Friday, that was it. And I've been on Long Island probably longer than at any time other than elementary school. And so I've made 2 trips since then, 3 trips. I've been to LA twice to see my children, my adult children, and once to do the Bill Maher show. And I went to Iowa with General Kelly to make a speech, which I flew privately. And what I would say to you is the first part of it, I was upset. I was,
Yes. Yes.
I'm worried about my business and I
Yes.
can't move and blah, blah, blah. And then what happens with human nature, you acclimatize to the situation.
Yes.
And now I will tell you that there's been some positives, and that doesn't mean to, there's been many people that have tragically died, and I
Yes.
don't want to, I'm not minimizing that. It's a very painful thing as a human being to see millions of people die from this disease,
Yes.
and over 400,000 of them in the United States. So I'm not minimizing that, but there's been some positive aspects too, where my life has slowed down a little bit. I'm able to
Yes.
do this Zoom call.
Well,
I didn't fly to Singapore for
yes.
24 hours to
Yes.
meet with you face to face and do it in a studio.
Correct.
And I'm noticing that I'm a little bit more productive, perhaps. I'm perhaps in a little bit better shape because I have more free time. And so I'm using the exercise, I'm taking advantage of that through exercise.
Yes.
And I would say that my wife and I are closer. Thank God we like each other.
Yes.
Because we've been together now in the house for almost a year.
Yeah.
And
That's beautiful you mentioned that, because this is how many people find out too, was I actually the whole time in the right relationship? Now
Mhm.
when spending so much time with each other.
Yes.
So you find a lot about yourself too. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, and I would say to you that, I would like us to return to normal, however. I do think it's
Yes.
better for our children. It's
Yes.
better for younger people to have the interaction. It's better for obviously all
Yes.
people. But also, I'd like there to be a return to safety. You know what I mean?
Yes.
We had 3,532 people die in the United States yesterday as a result of COVID-19. And so when you think about that, we had about 3,000 people die on 9/11. And so we're having a 9/11
That's great.
tragedy in the United States every day. I would like to see that stop.
Yes. Yes. As a global influencer, Anthony, what's your message for the younger generation?
Well, there's never been a more exciting time to be alive. I mean, yes, there's climate issues, there's energy issues, there's economic disparity, but we're also on the verge of major abundance. We're unleashing major technological transformation to the planet that could lead to abundance. If it's handled right politically, it'll be a deeper, more enriched human experience for people. And so you're on the cusp of cleaner energy. You're on the cusp of transformative technologies like the one you and I are using right now to speak to each other from
Yes.
around the world.
Yes.
And so there's never been a better time to be alive. But I think it's also very important for people to always be learning. And so I tell younger people, take risks. I tell younger people to not be embarrassed if something goes wrong.
Yes.
To embrace that part of your life. In fact, if anything, if you're not failing at a few things, you're probably not trying hard enough. And, there's a very famous American comedian. He's now 95 years old. His name is Mel Brooks. And so when I was growing up, he did some very funny movies, Young Frankenstein and Blazing Saddles. And these were very humorous, very funny movies. He's now 95. He lives in Los Angeles, but he said something many years ago that I often repeat to young people. And, it's something I try to live by, and I'll tell you what it is. He says, relax. None of us are getting out of here alive. So just relax. The point being, you're here on a journey. And
Yes, that's nice. Yes.
And so, your parents are going to make mistakes. Don't overly blame them. They're probably trying the best that they
Yes.
can.
Yes.
If you're coming from a bad situation, and you can focus on the future, well, that was your past. If you don't live in the past, then you won't live with levels of depression. You have your future, and if you have your health, focus on your present and your future. You see what I mean?
Live in the present.
Don't be overly anxious about the future either, because it's not here yet. You don't have to worry about what's coming because you have today. You can enjoy today. I'm going to paraphrase it, but Eastern philosopher Lao Tzu, He said if we spend too much time thinking about our past, then we have regrets because, of course, we made mistakes. So don't think too much about it. You'll be filled with depression. If you're worried too much about your future and what the future is coming, then you'll be filled with anxiety. Why do that to yourself? Focus on today. Focus on the fact that you're going to be able to hopefully have a few meals and you're going to meet with some friends and you've got an idea that you're hopefully going to advance and see if you can grow your business or your artistry, your creativity, whatever it may be, and relax because, none of us are getting out of here alive. Relax.
Beautiful message. Beautiful message. So what's next on the horizon? What's next for you?
Well, listen, I want to grow my business. We have a struggle in American politics right now. There's a specter of nationalism. There's some levels of anger about economic disparity and some unfairness in the society. There's a cultural struggle going on in America right now. And, I accidentally got into politics. And I was more into politics because of my business career. And then I ended up going to work for Mr. Trump. And so it thrusted me more into politics. But, I want to grow my business, but also be a part of that political discourse and part of that political conversation.
Yeah, interesting. Okay, to conclude this whole fireside chat on a humorous note, we have a leaderboard where I ask 3 fun questions to fill out this leaderboard.
Okay.
It's a trivia question. Where does Wall Street get its name from?
Well, on the corner of Wall and Broad, there was a wall that was built, and under a buttonwood tree, they started the first trading of those securities. And so the name Wall Street was representative of that wall.
Yes.
And of course, Broad Street was a wider street. And if you actually go down there and see that intersection, that's where it came from.
The wooden wall Dutch colonists built. I'm impressed. I'm impressed.
Yeah.
Well done. 1 point. Who is the most followed person on TikTok? I use this question because you had a TikTok chat on salt, I think.
It's a good question. So I don't know the answer to that. I did have those TikTok entrepreneurs on. I was very impressed with them. I don't know the answer. I could guess. I would say Justin Bieber, but I don't know.
Charlie D'Amelio. Well, okay. I didn't know either.
Yeah.
And now to the last 5-second challenge. Within 5 seconds, name me as many lockdown trends as possible.
Lockdown trends.
Lockdown trends.
Okay. Zoom, hand sanitizer, masks, outdoor dining, and the last one is homeschooling.
Homeschooling, exactly. Homeschooling, baking, etc. Okay, so we're coming to an end, and a special feature of this whole fireside chat is to find your comfortable corner and grab a cup of coffee or tea. What's your go-to coffee order?
So I drink black coffee.
Black coffee.
Yeah,
So
it's espresso.
espresso. Okay, a real coffee lover. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Anthony, for giving me this really opportunity and taking your time. I'm really, really, really honored and grateful. Thank you.
My pleasure, Juliana. Best of luck.
For you out there, I hope you learned something new about entrepreneurship and how to overcome setbacks through interpersonal skills. Today, I would like to end this episode with a quote from Hermann Hesse, who once said, "I've always believed, and I still believe, that whatever good or bad fortune may come our way, we can always give it meaning and transform it into something of value." I hope to see you again. Stay tuned, stay safe.